today's Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee. My name is Councillor Curtis Crossland and I'm the chair of this committee. The meeting is being webcast and the recording will be available for people to view later through the council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live will record and rebroadcast this meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from the Town Hall staff and the assembly point is Tudor Square. I'd also like to take this moment to welcome Councillor Willis Marshall to his first policy committee. And so for the benefit of those watching, we're going to go around and introduce all the members. So we'll start with Laura.
Laura Moynihan, Labour member for Manor Castle and deputy chair of this committee.
Councillor Karen McGowan, Labour member for Burley Ward.
Mark Whitaker, councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Don.
Nabila Maulana, councillor for Park and Arbourthorne.
Marianne Elliott, Green councillor for Leaders Valley.
Councillor Rob Rice, councillor for East Ecclesfield.
Willis Marshall, councillor for Woodhouse.
Owen Hooper, councillor for West Ecclesfield.
Thank you, everybody. If I can ask officers to introduce themselves when they present their reports. As far as I'm aware, we've received no apologies for absence. Everybody is in attendance. The meeting is open to the press and the public, and there are no items that contain any exempt information. So declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare an interest in any items of business on today's agenda? No? Perfect, thank you. So minutes of the last meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting can be found from page 11 of the agenda pack. Are we all happy to approve the minutes of the Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee, which was held on the 30th of September 2024? I don't see any dissent. Excellent, they are approved. We move on to public petitions, questions and statements. There are 30 minutes for this item of business. We have received one remit question, 5 agenda-related questions, and 1 statement from members of the public, and no petitions have been received for today's meeting. The remit questioner has received a written response which has been circulated to members and published on the council's website. As far as I'm aware, no supplementary questions from that have been received. We have had 5 agenda-related questions in total, but one is attending the meeting, and I suggest that we hear from Alex first. So, Alex, would you like to head up and ask your question? I think it will be, is it the left-hand button to turn the microphone on? Try the other button. There we go. I got it wrong. Right-hand button.
I've read.
Perfect. Yeah, that's working.
So a question related to the agenda item, the Public Spaces Protection Order. I'm the outreach manager for Ben Centre. We're a small charity based on the edge of the city centre that works with people involved in alcohol and substance misuse. Many of our service users are victims and perpetrators of antisocial behaviour in the city centre, and it seems clear that the proposed PSPO is designed to target this cohort. It will attempt to use enforcement options to lessen the visibility of vulnerable people in the city centre. There's a small and identifiable group of Sheffield residents who use drugs or alcohol in public spaces, who beg on the high street, are sleeping rough and don't have reliable access to toilet facilities. Within this group, it's not an exaggeration to say that the vast majority have a mental and or physical disability. Why was there not an impact report based on disability and the way in which these disabled people will be disproportionately affected by the PSPO measures? Additionally, in the analysis of the consultation, has any weight been given to responses from people and organisations who have expertise or work with the vulnerable people in question? For example, a commercial enterprise relates to these people and the problems very differently from a support service. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. The approach to enforcement will include a holistic assessment of the individual circumstances of the PSPO breaches and the person responsible and will make use of a full range of antisocial behaviour tools and powers, including ensuring that support is offered. By making a PSPO, if it is agreed later today, officers can intervene earlier to tackle specific activities that cause or are likely to cause antisocial behaviour. This allows officers to focus on prevention, advice and guidance as the initial priority so that support can be provided to individuals in need. It also allows officers to protect individuals who are part of a wider group who may be particularly vulnerable to harm because they are part of this group. The PSPO applies to everyone equally, and it's about behaviour, not about the person. So care has been taken with the wording of the restrictions in the proposed PSPO, which were revised following the public consultation earlier this year to make it less subjective. The terms harassment, alarm and distress are considered to be relatively strong words for the PSPO, and they are defined in the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014. This means that there is a legal threshold that must be met before behaviour can be deemed to have breached the restrictions in the order. This narrows down how the restrictions can be interpreted, thereby reducing the risk of criminalising people for reasons that are beyond their control. The PSPO is intended to tackle specific behaviours that are antisocial and applies to everybody equally, irrespective of whether or not they have a disability. An equalities impact assessment has been carried out. Alongside the PSPO, the enforcement and support protocol is there to ensure the use of the PSPO is not a blunt tool, but allows for education, engagement and support to be a priority over punitive action. A central element of our approach is ensuring the appropriate action is taken to address any breaches of the PSPO, is what we're calling the Notice of Intended Action. So this is a written notification that can be given by council and police officers to someone who has breached the PSPO. This notifies them that they have breached it, warns them that their behaviour is unacceptable, and advises them that the council or police may take further action to address the issue and prevent further antisocial behaviour. The advantage to this process is that it provides both a clear and easy to follow process for officers, while also ensuring there is visible intervention to address the breach and appropriate follow-up action where needed. This will include consideration of support needs where necessary. Our approach to dealing with breaches of the PSPO restrictions will be in line with the Sheffield harm reduction enforcement pathways, ensuring that we take every opportunity to identify and understand underlying causes of antisocial behaviour. This will be achieved by utilising existing partnership meetings and forums where individuals with multiple complex support needs are raised and appropriate multi-agency packages of care are agreed around substance misuse treatment, for example, mental health and housing support pathways if needed as well. These are set out in the City Centre Action Plan. The PSPO is designed to complement and contribute to this plan. The consultation report analysed all responses objectively, and the entire report, alongside other submissions that were made, including those with expertise in the area, were considered, and changes were made to the proposed restrictions based on the response of people during the consultation. Views expressed through the consultation were both positive and negative, but overall, just over 2/3 of individual respondents thought Sheffield City Centre should introduce a PSPO in the city, and a higher proportion of, I think it was 87% of organisations agreed with the introduction of the PSPO. One registered charity working with homeless individuals specifically commented that they would welcome a PSPO to reduce the opportunities for antisocial behaviour. So I think that in general, the PSPO is aimed at people's behaviours, not at the people themselves. And where we do identify people with specific vulnerable people or any specific needs, that we will work with different agencies to try and address those needs as well. So thank you again for your question. Yeah, thank you for coming to the meeting. We have also received 4 other agenda-related questions who aren't in attendance at today's meeting, and Rachel is going to read those out.
Thank you, Chair. So the first is from Roshan Lal. Their question is, I would like to submit a question about the proposed PSPO in Sheffield. My question is, how will special care be taken to ensure the guidance isn't interpreted so broadly that it ends up criminalising vulnerable people and people with nowhere else to go? For example, the homeless and other vulnerable people. My concern is that anyone deemed to be causing distress or alarm, which could be interpreted incredibly broadly, is at risk of criminalisation and harassment for reasons that are beyond their control. Issues around homelessness should not resolved by criminalising the homeless. This also increases the risk of discriminatory policing, especially against those deemed to be presenting as alarming or distressing, which could include anyone who doesn't fit neatly into the norms of typical presentation. I also fear that the proposed PSPO will have a chilling effect on protests that happens in the city centre, which happens often and is often loud and disruptive. Police could interpret protesters as loitering and potentially criminalise them, which privileges police powers over the public's right to protest. I hope you consider my question and the concerns I have raised when discussing the proposal.
Thank you. So the answer to that is fairly lengthy. It has been circulated to members and put on the council's website and will be included in the minutes. I would just like to repeat, though, that the terms harassment, alarm and distress are considered strong and are defined in the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act. They are a legally defined term. I would also add that the right to protest will not be affected by this proposed PSPO. As a local authority, in deciding whether to make a public spaces protection order, and what it should include, it must have regard to the rights of freedom of expression and freedom of assembly as well. So protest will not be hindered by this. So as I say, the full answer can be accessed on the council's website.
Thank you, Chair. So the next question was from Philippa G. Cock. In the public report dated 9th of December 2024 on the Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee on page 65, it states that special care must be made to ensure that a PSPO does not disproportionately affect vulnerable members of the community. I would like to know what special care precautions will be taken to ensure the PSPO does not criminalise vulnerable people in the town centre who are experiencing homelessness. The wording used in the PSPO specifically mentions loitering and begging as types of antisocial behaviour where the PSPO could be enforced. if it is in a manner that causes or is likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress to any person. This wording seems purposefully vague and open to discriminatory interpretation against anybody that doesn't look or behave in a conventional way. What safeguards will be put in place to avoid this PSPO to be used in such a discriminatory manner? The wording around loitering also implies that anyone who is gathering in the public space of the town centre for social or collective means could be penalised for simply being present in a public space. What measures will be put in place to avoid this from happening?
Again, the full answer can be accessed on the council's website and has been circulated to members. It's worth stating now, though, that in a way there are two thresholds that need to be met for a breach of the PSPO. There's the activity itself, and then sorry, where's my notes gone? And then harassment, alarm, and distress. So a breach of a PSPO will not be, you will not breach the PSPO by simply one of those things. And also a central part of the PSPO is the notice of intended action, which is a written notice, in effect a warning before any further escalation of that. And the advantage to this is that it provides both clear and easy to follow process for officers, while also ensuring that there is visible intervention to address the breach. So again, thank you for your question, and we'll move on to the next one.
Thank you, Chair. So the next question was from Amanda Keeling. A PSPO aimed at behaviours associated with homeless does nothing to resolve the underlying problems that are causing people to sleep rough and to be on the streets. It only serves to displace the behaviour to other areas of the city. I would like to know what plans the council has, PSPO aside, to support those experiencing homelessness in the city. A PSPO will not provide support or signpost people into services. It will damage trust in institutions and entrench problems. See Heap et al. 2022. How will the council ensure that trusting relationships of care can be built between its agents and people experiencing homelessness in Sheffield in the context of a punitive PSPO regime?
So thank you for the question. The council is working with many partners and is involved with activities that provide support to vulnerable individuals, particularly those suffering from homelessness. The council's priorities for tackling homelessness and rough sleeping can be found on in the Homelessness Prevention and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2023 to 2028. Rough sleeping is the most visible and harsh form of homelessness and continues to be a growing problem nationally, and Sheffield is no exception to this. Although addressing rough sleeping in Sheffield continues to be a challenge, although the number of new people rough sleeping is low, Homeless Prevention and Rough Sleeping Strategy Action Plan ensures that their needs are promptly addressed. The Rough Sleeping Initiative team that work in housing solutions do outreach specifically for those rough sleeping. And there's a full answer to this question again on the council's website, which has also been circulated to members.
Thank you. And the final question is from Dr. Vicky Heap, Dr. Benjamin Archer and Dr. Alex Black from Sheffield Hallam University. We met with council officers on the 20th of March to share our ASB expertise. Here we offered to act in an advisory, critical friend capacity, subsequently submitting our response to the consultation, making clear why we could not support the proposed PSPO. Unfortunately, we were not contacted again. We remain concerned that issuing FPNs to vulnerable people could still occur despite the enforcement and support protocol, which the report concedes will not always be a linear process. If these individuals are unable or unwilling to engage with support services, how will a FPN fixed penalty notice they are unable to pay stop the antisocial behaviour? Relatedly, is the use of FPNs in these circumstances a shortcut to further criminalisation by prosecution instead of issuing the FPN and requesting a criminal behaviour order, which could ban individuals from the city centre? And finally, the inclusion of a new dispersal element in the PSPO circumvents the usual process of obtaining a 48-hour dispersal order, Section 34 of the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014. That requires senior police officer sign-off. Including dispersal requirements in a PSPO also negates Home Office guidance, which states that formal dispersal powers should only be a short-term solution. How will spatial displacement be managed?
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive question, which has an equally comprehensive answer on the council's website. I would like to add, though, that I, along with officers, are very grateful for the meeting that the questioners had about their feedback with the PSPO. This was considered alongside the consultation feedback, and changes were made thanks to that feedback. There was a point in there about dispersal powers in the Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Act, I believe. So they're used to react to a specific short-term issues, for example, to reduce violence or antisocial behaviour around a football match. It enables the police to order people away from a specific area for a specific time period. The purpose of the PSPO's requirements to leave is to provide an intervention that will help to avoid more formal actions, such as issuing a fixed penalty notice. It is a low-level intervention which demonstrates that someone's behaviour is harming others and that it is not acceptable. This requirement can only be used following the breach of one of the PSPO's restrictions and will facilitate resolving the situations in line with the enforcement and support protocol. But as I mentioned there, there's a very comprehensive answer on the council's website, which will also be included in the minutes and has been circulated to all members. And I believe that is the end of the questions. We do have a public statement relating to the agenda. Are they here?
No, they're not attending today.
So what's the process with that? Do you read that out again?
On their request, I would. I've not received a response from them, but I can read it out if members wish.
Do we want it reading out, members? I think it will be published on the website, and it has been circulated as well, hasn't it? Perfect. Well, in that case.
Councillor Elliott's
Oh, sorry. Yep.
My colleague Malachi Haby submitted a couple of questions in time, but because he's a councillor, we were advised that I could ask those questions on his behalf. Do you want me to ask them now or wait until we have the agenda item?
I think wait until the substantive item.
Thanks.
That's okay. Thank you. So next on the agenda is members' questions. There are 10 minutes for this, maximum of 10 minutes for this agenda item. We've received one question from members of the committee. A written answer has been provided and circulated to all members of the committee. But this item of business is to provide an opportunity for the member who has submitted the question to ask one supplementary question. Is there a supplementary question? Rob? You look very confused then.
Oh, yes.
I should have moved on quickly then, shouldn't I?
Honestly, have not had time since asking the question to read the answer. Sorry. I'm all over the place today. As you can tell, I'm not in my finery. I've been rolling around on the floor at work looking at steel. I have not had the time to read the response, so I do apologise on that. But I would like to. This is regarding the LGBT swimming. Yes, no, that's the one. I sent that quite late at night. So it was. Yeah. So I'm just wondering whether any names have been suggested, any branding, because I think getting people active, especially members of marginalised communities, is incredibly important. So I'd like to propose formally paddling with pride as an option. But is there anything that the providers will have identified as alternative branding?
Thank you for your question. It sounds like you were having fun at work this morning. So, with the transition over to Everyone Active, I'm sure they will be looking at various different branding options for things, and I'm sure their ears will be open for your suggestion. And it's probably a discussion for one of our weekly briefings. Yeah? Excellent. Thank you. Also, good name suggestion. Yeah. So we move on to the next item. This is the work programme from page 21 of the agenda pack, and the presenting officer is Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So the committee's work programme aims to show all the known substantive items for forthcoming meetings of this committee. It also reports any referrals from other committees and council. There's nothing to report for this meeting though. You can see on page 24 there's a table which includes additions and amendments since the last meeting. There are a number of new items since the last meeting for members to be aware of, a couple which we're receiving at today's meeting. And then the work programmes themselves can be found from page 27, and that sets out what items we're expecting at future meetings of the committee. If there's any specific questions on items, I'll hand over to officers to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I think it's also worth noting that since the publication of this agenda, full council, I think, proposed the rivers, was it joint working with CPL and TRC about the city's rivers, I think.
Yeah, apologies, I've not got the final wording of the council motion yet, but there will be a referral to this committee regarding that, so I'll explain about that in a future meeting. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you for that. Does any member have any questions on the work programme? Oh, Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, just wanted to raise that the LNRS, the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, being led by the South Yorkshire region, is, I think, due for completion in spring, but it might be later. So it would be good for us to be updated on that, obviously, because that has implications for Sheffield. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to... Was that a suggestion to bring something earlier? Was that? Sorry, just catching up on notes.
Chair, it would be appropriate to bring an update on the local nature recovery strategy for the March committee, if that's acceptable.
It's not currently on the work programme.
Oh, it's not... Yeah, perfect. I think that can work then, yeah. Just bring an update in March if that's acceptable to members. Yeah. So with that addition, are we happy to accept the recommendations for the work programme? That was accepted unanimously. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. So next on to item 8. This is from page 33 of the agenda pack. This is regarding our leisure facilities in the city and Everyone Active. So the presenting officer is Tammy, who is joined by John Senior, who is the Regional Director of Everyone Active.
Chair, I'm going to pick this item up an intro, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I'm giving Tammy the afternoon off. So I'm Lisa Firth, I'm the Director of Parks, Leisure and Libraries. So the report provides context to the presentation that you will see from John and his team at Everyone Active. I won't take you through the full report, just a couple of points to note. That section 2 gives the context for our new partnership with Everyone Active, and in section 2.3 of the report, explains how Everyone Active will contribute to Sheffield's Move More strategy, and how Sheffield takes a whole systems approach to the promotion of physical activity for adults and children in Sheffield. In section 2.8, the report outlines how our contract with Everyone Active will contribute to the Council's accommodation strategy and how the Council's investment in facilities will ensure that our leisure venues remain sustainable in future. And with your permission, Chair, I'd just like to add an additional note for the minutes at this point. I think it's really important to stress that at section 2.8 in the report, that our current contractual arrangements have served the city well, with Sheffield City Trust for over 30 years, and despite the best efforts of the Council and Sheffield City Trust, the existing operating model doesn't support doesn't allow for the amount of capital investment that is required in the facilities. It would have required the council to underwrite any loan facilities with Sheffield City Trust, which due to austerity, the council can't guarantee. So because of that significant periods of austerity and rising energy costs, the impacts on the council and the trust's ability to invest in facilities, which has allowed the venues to fall into an unacceptable state. This is not a reflection of the way that Sheffield City Trust have run the venues. I wanted to stress that as an addition to the report. Section 2.8 further sets out the liability for future repairs and maintenance, which will sit with Everyone Active, and this will be monitored through the robust contract arrangements and through key performance indicators as we start to deliver the contract. Section 3 of the report shows how the new arrangements will contribute to our council plan and the outcomes and triple lock ambitions of people, prosperity and planet. So the committee is asked to approve 3 recommendations from the report. Please note the contents of the report, which I've not outlined in full. Note the accompanying presentation from colleagues at Everyone Active, and that future updates will be provided to this committee outlining the developing partnership between the council and Everyone Active and the achievement as set out in the contract specification. And with your permission, I will hand over to the presentation.
Perfect, thank you. Firstly, I'd like to welcome John to Sheffield and to Sheffield City Council. Sheffield does have quite a sporting heritage. I'm sure that we're looking forward to working with you to help grow that through the years as well. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Let's break the microphone to start with. That might be a good place to start. But we're full maintenance responsibility, so we'll be fine.
If you want to take on maintenance
we'll fix it.
the town hall, that would be amazing.
Fine, we'll fix it. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the invite this afternoon. Just first of all, in terms of introductions, my name's John Senior. I'm the Regional Director with Everyone Active. There are 3 regions within the group, and I've got the privilege to look after what we call the West region, of which Sheffield is in that region. I'm joined by Dan Steed, my colleague, who's the Senior Development Manager, Business Development Manager, and effectively, although Dan's boss might disagree with him, we were the kind of main people that put the bid together, and that's how we bid. So the operational team, which I look after, works with the development team, so effectively I know what we put in the bid because I put it there in the first place, and there's nobody else to blame other than myself. But it's my responsibility as a regional director to ensure that we meet the objectives of the contract in whatever form that they are, and I'll continue to work very closely with the teams that will 2P over to us in the first stage of January. I've tried on the presentation just to give you an oversight about the company, just so that hopefully you can see how we can interconnect with a lot of the resources that the city's currently got, the passion that it's got, and the ambition that it's got to be where it wants to be. So if you just work with me through the presentation, that's my aim. Okay. So just to kick off, we are the longest established operator in the sector. 1987 was when we started back in Hinckley. Some of the individuals that were working the company at that stage still work for the company. I've been with the company for 32 years. My managing director, who I report to, is 35 years, and the chief executive of the charity, Jackie Tillman, she's been with the company for 33 years. So we've got a lot of strength in depth that goes back a long way, and we understand what the industry has moved to be, and it's in its varying forms. And Sheffield acquisition is, if not the highlight, one of the highlights of the last 35 years of operations. So please be reassured that we take this contract extremely seriously. We currently have 240 leisure centres. We currently have a turnover around about £400 million. We work on behalf of 70 different clients. I think in the total period of our existence, we've actually only ever worked for 85 authorities. So you get a feel for the fact that how many contracts we've been awarded as opposed to how many that we've lost over that duration. We take all of those contracts extremely seriously, and we make sure that every contract has, whilst extensive central support, it also has very, very specific local determination in the way in which it works. And whilst I probably worded this particularly badly when I put the presentation together, our business philosophy does work around extensive central and regional support in terms of locally contract-defined partnerships. So we have a lot of people centrally. There's actually 12 group managers supported by numerous regional managers that then work locally to support individual parts of our operation. We currently employ 15,000 people, soon to be nearly 16,000 people when the Sheffield transfer occurs. There's actually 700 people transferring to us on the 2nd of January. But the important fact for me is 75% of the people in that 15,000 transferred into us under 2P. So we know what 2P means. We know what 2P feels like. I 2P'd in 32 years ago. I still remember what that felt like. And we have I think, an extremely advanced methodology for actually integrating people into our teams very, very quickly. And because we know that if people don't want to work or don't feel that they're being valued or that their contribution is being honoured, they don't produce anything like the types of service levels that we feel that they need to do. So that is a big aspect. And if you ask me what do I think is the biggest benefit of partnering with Everyone Active, it would be the people and its ability to understand what it takes to take on contracts like this. Every one of those 85 contracts at some stage has been mobilised. So needless to say, we consider that we're relatively good at that. Okay, so in terms of mobilisation itself, Sheffield is a large contract. It has a lot of varying moving parts. It has a lot of things that are extremely strong in the sector, and it has other things in its portfolio that we hope to improve as we progress. There are a lot of things that we've been able to support already, but effectively that most of our work starts on the 2nd of January. We've got an extensive team currently working on the setup. At the moment, I would probably estimate about 150 people within our organisation are working in front of the scenes and behind the scenes to get ready for the 2nd of January. Not the easiest of dates to start a contract. Usually the 2 weeks prior to a contract is usually the heaviest amount of load that we're lifting. Christmas and New Year might make that somewhat challenging, but we are geared up to do that. As I've indicated, that we've got a lot of people that are currently working around each of the projects. We've had extensive support from the Trust, and that is not something that we take for granted, and in usual cases it's very, very difficult to get the sorts of support and information and assistance that we've had from the Trust, and I can't speak more highly of actually their contribution, and as well with Tammy and her team. Everybody that we've met from the City Council has been extremely supportive in what we're doing, which makes it significantly easier, and believe you me, that is not a given in our trade, particularly if we're taking over one of our competitors. So it's extensive, but the support that we've had, the amount of people that we've put to it, puts us in a very confident place. My experience of mobilisation, and I've done over 20 mobilisations myself, is that there are two things that are important. One is the people, and being able to convince people early on that we're viable and we're worth working with. And that actually even starts at bid stage. We're trying to get people as we go around sites and we interact with people, that they understand that we are an organisation they'd actually like to work for. And if we don't win the contract, the best is that we can hope for is that people are disappointed it wasn't us and it was somebody else. The second thing is to keep flexible. There are so many things in a mobilisation that you can't plan at bid stage. You have to be able to practically work through those as they occur. And so much of our mobilisation will take place after the 2nd of January. It will probably take us up to a year to really settle into the contract in full. If anybody that says they could do it by the end of January probably doesn't know the full extent to which we need to get involved in what we're doing. And you know, that's important. And I suspect that in the next 15 years, we'll be working through many, many projects together. We've got a big investment programme, which is extremely attractive to us to get involved in, 4 big investments. And it is something that we do on a very regular basis. So please be reassured that we know our way around those things. We've had a range of meetings already that have been hosted by the Trust. We've met with over 100 colleague representatives and we've undertaken a colleague welcome presentation. Well, we undertook 12 actually, but we've to 350 colleagues, which is approximately 50%. Again, that is a higher number than we'd normally expect. So clearly the engagement from colleagues is extensive. Customer comms will start this week. We were waiting for the contract to be signed as it was last Thursday, so those comms will start. Although we have started already to meet with some of the significant, or well, they're all significant, but some particular stakeholders. We've met those people already as introductions, but we'll continue to do that through and over Christmas, and then particularly into the new year. Much to the delight of our colleagues in other parts of the country, we've got an extensive team that starts on the 2nd of January. Most will start to arrive in Sheffield on the 1st of January, which is a particularly significant afternoon, with hangovers and all, but we'll be ready on the 2nd of January, and we aim that support to last for as long as that support is required. If we're still supporting certain departments at the end of January, early into February, that wouldn't surprise me at all. That's practically putting people into the ground. That's not people on telephones or on laptops. That's people physically in sites. We'll continue to do that as long as we need to. We have, just out of interest, got a full replacement of all IT, web, app, all computers, laptops, etc. are all changed over, and we will commence the branding exercises from the first couple of days in January. We'll be working through those as well, so you should see some visible changes. Okay. Just to pull some key headlines out of the work that Dan did, but also this kind of stays at the front of our mind. These are the kind of 5 things that really kind of focus our minds. Our job is to increase participation. It's to increase participation across all sectors of Sheffield. We called the company, or the customer-facing part of the company, Everyone Active, for that very specific reason. We know that price is sensitive in all our communities, in all our contracts. So what we aim to do is to kind of fix a price point or a price matrix and a price model that allows for different parties within different parts of the society to be able to access the facilities. That's really important to us. Ultimately, we get paid if we increase participation. If we don't increase participation, then we don't get paid. It's as simple as that. That's how our mantra works. And that logic has steered us extremely successfully through COVID. It took us through the energy crisis, and I'm sure it'll take us through national insurance increases as well. But our ability to increase participation in the centres is quite significant, and we feel that we can make big contributions to those, not only when the facilities are developed, but particularly in the meantime, whilst we wait for those projects to come by. We believe there's improvements in service delivery for both on a physical, practical basis, but also on service to customers. We're very mindful of the role that we play in carbon reduction. It's likely that we are, or we will be, the biggest carbon producers in the City Council's portfolio. just because running leisure centres use lots of gas and tends to have pretty impactful time frames with regards to your challenges and your targets, of which we will play a part. We're your partner for the next 15 years, and therefore we know that time will have a very significant impact on the planet, and the contributions that we make across the industries is important to us. We believe that we will strengthen the employment and the economy within Sheffield. We'll employ more people than is currently employed. We've currently got about 25 vacancies for lifeguards that we're actively recruiting in the city at the moment. I suspect that will continue on into the new year. But that's just the start of the development that we know that we will be part of. And finally, and just to echo the comments that have been made before, is that we believe it's important to be sustainable. If we're sustainable for the next 15 years, we'll continue to be able to invest. The vast majority of our 70 contracts, we've put more investment in after we've started the contract than we originally committed to at the start. We see lots of opportunities in lots of leisure centres to develop. Where we see that opportunity and where we match ambition, then effectively we like to partner those sorts of projects with our council colleagues. The next couple of slides are probably more just for information, just to try to give you a feel for the size of organisation that we are, and in particular the breadth and range of experiences that we're involved in. We have multiple group managers, regional managers, working groups, think tanks, initiatives that go across the whole range of reasons why people attend leisure centres. To give you an idea, we have just over 1 million swimming visits in the company every month. So across the year, it's just short of 13 million. We currently teach 188,000 children to swim every week. That's not including the school programmes, that's just our swim lesson programme. And we currently have just under 400,000 members who attend our fitness facilities. That doesn't include casual customers who are not members. So we have extensive experience in working with lots of different parts of, and in some contracts, there are a few projects, a few areas which are very specifically important to that particular contract, and that team will link out into the group to find like-minded or likely challenged teams to be able to kind of cross ideas and move them around. Sheffield has multiple versions of that situation. That was the attraction for us to bid. That was the attraction for us to put the amount of effort that we put into the bid. And we feel very, very keen that we're seen to be a positive partner that can achieve things on your behalf, and that we can make something very special occurring on the contracts. I've just put the first slide or two just in for that reason. The 6 pillars, is just as an example, was a tie into the Sport England United the movement, where effectively what we were looking to do was to build our outreach programmes, so those programmes which are not only involved within our centres but also involved in the communities, was to build around kind of key initiatives, because those 6 pillars are very, very common pillars used by all our authorities. And what our contract teams do is they'll pull from those pillars and they'll work out what's the best combination of service support to apply into the particular contract. I suspect in Sheffield's case, all 6 pillars will be pretty high priority. The working groups that sit behind all of those pillars contribute constantly to development programmes. As funding streams come available, we work under those individual pillars, and we build up a track record, and we build up a level of experience that then we can locally employ across other aspects of our group. So what we're trying all the time is to generically grow what we can as an organisation, but then locally apply it where that's needed in the particular parts of each of the contracts. That, for me, makes sense. And then I've added an extra sheet just to give you a little bit of background to some of those initiatives that's been identified just as part of that programme. That's just a snapshot, but it's just to maybe get you thinking about the volumes that we work with, the amount of teams that we have, 52,000 people on the excise referral schemes as we stand at the moment. It's on this slide. We've got just over 3,500 Parkinson's memberships that are free of charge at the moment. We've got 10,000 GP excise referrals. So we have significant volumes of activity in some of the areas that I know from speaking to officers. It's something that you have big ambition in order to realise. Just to take a slightly different line, is just don't take our word for it. The UK Active Awards in 2024, just in terms of development of leisure centres in the leisure centre sector, we entered 20 of our leisure centres out of the 240 into the 6 categories. 13 were nominated for the finalists, 3 won their respective category, and 1 of those won the overall national award. That was Hucknall, Silksworth, within the company, and the company was awarded the Outstanding Organisation of the Year. So where we're judged externally, we do come up and we can generate a measurable comparison to other organisations. So I think in terms of, you're in good, safe hands in terms of operation, know what we need to do. And then finally, just one slide on partnership, and I think this is just a general statement really, is that we massively share your ambition, not just at Ponds Forge, which needs some significant thought, some significant investment and some future direction, but also all of the facilities, whether it be Springs or whether it be Concord. All of these facilities have a role to play in their respective communities. We can bring significant direction and improvement to those, and we're really looking forward to working through all the developments, but also both whether they're physical changes to the building, but whether they're just approaches to individual aspects of what we do. As I've hopefully demonstrated, we have got capability with an EA. There's always an expert somewhere, even if they're not an expert, they like to tell you that they are. There's always somebody to kind of share our ambition. We've already, we think, started to build strong working relationships on a very practical basis, and I think that bodes extremely well for the future. Every person that we've met from the City Council in any of the departments has been extremely supportive, as mentioned before. That is not a given. That is seriously not a given, and we are appreciative of that. We have got a track record of facility development. We bid on the basis of our confidence of what we believe that we can do based upon our history of what we've done before. We absolutely believe that we've got the technical strengths to support the ambitions that the objectives that the council have got. And we've got very, very high hopes of a very positive future for the partnership.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that presentation. I think what is clear is that Everyone Active, as you say, has a real good reputation for facility management and getting people involved, and Sheffield has a really good history when it comes to sporting heritage and being excited when our residents get to the Olympics and win medals. So I think the partnership going forward will be really strong for the city as well. I think what I quite like hearing at the start of your presentation was about the partnership work with Sheffield City Trust as well, and how the handover process is going. So I'd like to take this moment now actually to formally, on behalf of the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee and Sheffield City Council, to place on record our thanks to Sheffield City Trust for the contribution the organisation has made to the city for the last 3 decades. The creation of Sheffield City Trust was an innovative, forward-thinking approach to deliver inward investment in sport and leisure that has been emulated in numerous other cities. the benefit of a close working relationship between Sheffield City Trust and Sheffield City Council has ensured that Sheffield is seen as a centre of excellence for the development of residents' well-being, whilst promoting the city at national and international audiences. The tireless work of the volunteer trustees and the staff at Sheffield City Trust is to be valued and remembered, as the benefit of decisions made 30 years ago continue to be seen in our city. So thank you to everybody at Sheffield City Trust. Do any members have any questions or comments? So I saw Marianne's hand first, then Laura. Oh, I've got loads. Let me take a note. Well, I'll just take Marianne and Laura first and then.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for that comprehensive presentation. I just want to ask a couple of things that didn't come up on the presentation, if that's okay. So the first one is food. That won't be a surprise to Tammy. Just for context for new members of this committee, regarding food in leisure centres and the arena, we had a youth organisation called Bite Back come to visit the committee, and we had a couple of meetings with them, and they basically told us that these venues are littered with vending machines, selling sweets and drinks with like virtually no nutritional value. So we've been promised by Tammy that the contractual arrangement with you will have a lot more teeth. So I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more how that will work. Are we, in terms of where the products that are being marketed and sold, and also the placement of them?
In the interest of time, could we take Laura's as well, and then we'll come back round for.
Mine's more of a comment, really. I'm really pleased to see that you're going to create 30 full-time equivalent roles in the first 3 years, and particularly the groups that you're targeting, such as unemployed, NEETs and care leavers. That's really welcome. But I think you mentioned working with local organisations and job centres. I would say don't work with the job centres, work with the local community organisations, particularly because the mayoral authority's skills strategy, the pathways element of that funding, is going to be delivered by local agencies. I think it's really important that it's not just the groups, there's also issues of diversity within those specific groups. And we really do want diversity in the workforce at all levels, not just in sort of trainees or apprenticeships, but up to senior management. We want to see a real diverse organisation. Thank you.
Over to you guys, that's okay. And then I'll come back round for some more questions.
Okay, if I can just jump in first. I'm Tammy Barris, I'm the Head of Sport, Leisure and Events at the City Council. Just to point out that we've not actually started the work yet, so we've got a contract specification that covers the points on the food. We will be beginning to work, Laura, with local organisations. So we've been in a bit of a tricky situation until the contract was signed, which was last Thursday, to be able to start to make some of the introductions. So just in fairness to colleagues from everyone active, some of those relationships will start to build from this point going forward. On the bite size, they're definitely on the list. It's a group that we want to get colleagues talking to. We've got information within the specification about what we want to achieve as part of the food offer through the contract. We discussed that with bite size, so we'll definitely bring them in. And I think similarly, Laura, working with local voluntary sector organisations, it's something that we'll begin to start and develop those relationships moving forward. So I don't know if you want to add anything, but it's early days and we're just starting to build some of that.
I think probably just as a general point really is that we knew when we bid the Sheffield contract that there was numerous different support groups, different agencies, different bodies, and we've introduced a role called a partnership manager. And the partnership manager is the most senior role within our structure within Sheffield. We only have one other partnership manager within the group, and that's in Bristol, and for a very similar reason. And what we wanted to do was to free up somebody senior enough to be able to work with the different agencies within the city, just to make sure. Now, in this case, we're talking about food, or it could be we're talking about employment. You are our customer. If we do not satisfy our customer, then 15 years is a long time. If we do, 15 years is a great time. So we have a contract manager, which is normally the most senior role, that sits beneath the partnership manager, but just to make, hopefully, just to help the thought process that we will have senior managers. And this particular request is not an uncommon thing that we deal with, and the same with employment. That they're both very familiar things that other contracts within our organisation deal with.
Great, thank you for that. So I've got Alan, Mark, Rob. Did anybody else want to? Perfect, thank you. I think I've got everybody now. Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, John. Very good. So, a new year and a new beginning for leisure in Sheffield. It's exciting times for the city and for the people of this city. I'm pleased that it's a long-term contract, so we can get things done. It mentions about supporting net zero ambitions. Running leisure centres and pools hasn't been easy over the last sort of 5-6 years, through COVID and through energy costs. Some authorities and lost pools. During COVID, I know one or two that closed them during COVID, never reopened, which is really sad. Moving to 2.2, just a comment about engagement on a range of health and wellbeing outcomes and opportunities. In particular, my ward covers part of S35, Thorncliffe and High Green, got areas of deprivation there, and it's really good that S35 is included in this report. Thank you. On 2.8, Lisa's already mentioned about the long-term capital investment which has been missing. Tell me, will we have, this committee have some sort of update on each of the centres as we improve the facilities and bring them up to a standard? It won't be a short-term thing, it'll be a long-term thing to bring them back, but I think that will be useful for this committee.
Yes, that's the plan. I think we'll be looking at a knowledge briefing session in February, and then a future full committee public meeting. So that's what we're aiming for, Alan.
Thank you. And finally, John, if we could have a copy of the presentation, that would be useful. I think it would also be useful, Lisa, for all councillors on the City Council. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Mark?
Thank you. In Stocksbridge, which I represent, which is an area about 12 miles from the town centre here, we've got a very dynamic leisure centre that's not integrated into the Sheffield system. It's run by volunteers and supported by the Stocksbridge Town Council, amongst others. Will you be able to find any way of working with the Stocksbridge Leisure Centre for such things as the acquisition of the necessary swimming pool chemicals, or are they outside the system completely? I imagine they could benefit not just from your expertise, but also your bulk buying abilities.
We've been approached probably by 6 or 7 organisations already about potentially working in whether it be school pools or other facilities within Sheffield already. And our stock response is, can we get the ones set up that we're contracted to set up first before we spread our net a little bit wider? That saying that is that, you know, in time, I'm sure that we can provide assistance. And we know that we do work across a network of areas where it comes to GP referral schemes or exercise referral schemes, etc. So just give us a few months, but then ask me the same question again. That's fine.
It's great, thank you. We'll take Rob and then Nabila.
Yeah, so my first, the name of your organisation is Everyone Act, and I was just wondering when it comes to kind of expanding kind of access schemes, Sheffield City Trust do and have done a very good job, but just wondering about kind of underrepresented groups and kind of getting them into kind of leisure facilities. I've already mentioned previously in my question the kind of swimming lessons based on LGBT or focused at LGBTQ plus people. That's another name. Rainbow Lanes. There you go. If you want to put that one in the bank. And I'm just wondering whether you've got any strategies that worked in other organisations across the country that you'd be looking at bringing into Sheffield.
There's definitely lots of programmes that we run. They tend to be balanced in two areas. One's education. What is the point? What's the relevant reason why I should do this? Whichever respective group that we're talking about. So one's about education, and then the second is about, well, okay, so how do we get that message to the people that we need to get that message to? So it's about communication, and that's why the partnership role for us was so key. We have health and wellbeing and activity managers built into our structure that we'll be transferring over and that we'll be developing, and those are specifically geared up to try to work with different parts of the communities. I've mentioned the contract in Bristol that we've had since 2006, and in particular St Paul's and Easton, which are very, very diverse population groups, and working with different respective groups in those areas. Community leaders particularly have high value. With due respect to everybody from the officer side, council routes don't, the formal routes don't tend to always work. It tends to be much more about people building people relationships. So what we'll look to do is to build where those communities exist, what educational programs that we can support with, and then potentially also we've got some very specific sessions that can be run that have particular types of clothing that can be worn in those sessions, that they may be lifeguarded by female lifeguards, or that they may be lifeguarded by people of I'm trying to put myself into a number of backgrounds. Older people to be more reflective of the population. I've got to be very, very careful how I explain this. So yeah, we understand that.
And I'm going to ask a very quick question on another one. Part 2.8 mentioned, and I have experience of this using leisure centres as well, of how tired some leisure centres in Sheffield are feeling, and the significant amount of capital investment. I do know the amount of investment you've given to other leisure centres countrywide, and the fact that you do often exceed the stated value. I'm just wondering, kind of, do we have an idea at this point how much the investment is bringing up to standard, and how much of it will be adding new facilities, new features, as it were, to our leisure offering? Kind of, where does that balance lie?
So the investment in the facilities, the new build facilities, is generated through the revenue model within the council. So the local authority will fund that work. Part of that has been backlog maintenance, and we've undertaken a huge amount of that today. I think there was about £19 million approved at a previous finance committee, and that work's been ongoing for the last 2 or 3 years to bring the facilities up to a reasonable standard for the point of handover. I think in addition to our investment in the new sites that John's touched on and the refurbishment work at Ponsforge and Hillsborough, Everyone Active colleagues are also bringing investment and elements of capital to enhance the facilities. I don't know if you want to go into any detail about that, John and Dan. So things like pool view systems that we don't currently have will be put in. Some of the facilities not at our cost, but at Everyone Active's cost. So there's a split and a share between the work that's going to be going through ongoing. I think not for today, but there's a significant programme of work, and I think we need to bring that, as Alan suggested earlier, through a future committee and give you the detail on that. But the split of it is between council and further investment enhancement type works that everyone active colleagues will bring as well.
And just to confirm that the plan is currently that Springs and Concord leisure centres will be completely rebuilt. Hillsborough possibly rebuilt. The plan was to rebuild Hillsborough, but it might be that we can redevelop Hillsborough. So that's, and then the investment into Ponds Forge and Healy and
well, it's Ponds Forge mainly, the others it's life cycle refurbishment
Life
and
cycle
investment.
refurbishment.
So I think the main ones are the redevelopments at Springs and Concord, potential rebuild of Hillsborough. We don't know yet, we don't know where that's going to land, but potentially could be a refurbishment rather than a rebuild. And we've also got plans for Ponds Forge. So they're the ones that are the older, more tired facilities that are requiring investment. On top of that, the other side, so for example EISS will continue to have a programme of life cycle maintenance throughout the 15-year duration, and I'm sure throughout that 15 years there'll be evidence hopefully of invest to save programmes of work that we don't even know about yet, but the contract will generate, and we'll develop ideas together as the partnership grows. So watch this space and we'll see what happens over the duration.
I think the only thing I would suggest is that we already have had meetings with council officers about what that potential programme looks like, and it's really evident that there's different ways you can spend money, but if we work together you can spend it to be as impactful as you can. We know the customer experience is made up of a lot of different things, not just a gym or a pool. It's made up of circulation space and change rooms. We've already had some thoughts and processes that we can look through in terms of actually what that programme looks like. So what we'll be trying to do is to make sure that the money that the council invest in the facilities is invested for the overall best book, if you like, value for money. And I think that we've got a lot of experience of developing a lot of facilities over the years, and we've built a few, we've refurbed many, and most of the ones that we refurb we keep open whilst we're refurbing them, so we understand kind of what it takes to refurb those centres, and we're at the front end of a very, very exciting period in the next 10 years. You know, that your portfolio will look significantly better at the end of that.
Thank you very much for that. And it is a very exciting time, actually. And I think that we had a trip round some of our leisure centres, and some of them are looking a bit tired and dated. I think that renovations and investment that focuses on the user experience will be really important, and make it exciting to go for a swim and go to the gym, because, well, some people need quite a bit of, I know I need motivation to go to the gym, so yeah, making it exciting and fun. So finally we have Nabila.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, John. I was really heartened to see the 6 pillars you outlined as well. One of the most positive aspects, I suppose, of the work done by Uriah Rennie, Rob Bormack and the community team at Sheffield City Trust was the holiday activities for children and young people, and particularly in my ward park in Arbourthorne, where families can't always afford to pay for really expensive holiday packages or trips abroad. And I'm not expecting a plan right away, but I hope to hear in due course about how this provision can be extended, improved and continued going forward. Thank you.
We knew that there was a lot of work being done outside of the centres when we were bidding, and Dan spent a lot of time gleaning the information that we could at that stage. I think it's fair to say that not just in that aspect, but a lot of some of the more complex things that we're doing, we've kind of engineered in the first 3 to 6 months. I think it's 6 months, I think, on the outreach programme, just to review, just to see just keep running what's going, but understand how we can fit into that. Sometimes we don't need to interject. We just need to prime something that's already working. We don't need to change direction sometimes, and sometimes it's better just to stand back, understand what's happening, support what's going on, and then complement and develop from that point. We knew that was one of the programmes particularly that we built in some time to review it, but hopefully we can support what happens in the meantime, and then hopefully come September, in say quarter, from September to October, then we'll have a better idea as to how we want to further develop what's already there. We've got a bigger, under the contract, we've got a much bigger commitment to deliver than is currently being delivered. So that's one of the services that will be dramatically expanded, just because we're contracted to do that as well.
Just, if I could just add a little bit to that. So, as John just said, we've got a sort of in our first year, effectively 12 months. It's a period of sort of 3 to 6 months establishing our team, understanding the local communities, implementing our standards through our sort of strategic health and wellbeing team, and then it's about working, engaging with the communities and understanding what the need is specifically, because there's so many different wards across Sheffield that will need different things, and therefore that's the sort of development phase between sort of 3 to 9 months, and then 9 to 12 months will be implementing those plans and obviously working with local communities to take it to that next level. So, and John just alluded to there, what we don't want to do is come in and say, that's how you've been doing it, we're going to do it our way. It's about complementing what's already going on rather than conflicting it, and actually developing and enhancing and changing where necessary for the greater good going forward and obviously for the longer term.
Just to add to that, the communities team, so Yuri and Rob and the team that are out on the ground delivering at the moment, they'll chupi over as part of the contract. So the people that the communities are familiar with on the ground will still be around, they'll still be delivering, they'll still be out in our parks and open spaces, for example. So as colleagues have said, that work will continue, and the familiarity of the staff on the ground will continue as well.
So I did previously say that was our last speaker, but then I had an indication from Willis, and considering it's his first policy, I think I'll let him off. But then I had another indication from Karen, so in the interest of political fairness, I will let both of them speak, and then we'll move on. So first Willis, and then Karen.
I'm sorry to put you boot in it, but Marianne wants to speak as well.
Cross-party fairness, fine. Willis, Karen, Marianne.
Right, thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions. In regards to 3.3, it mentions that there'll be 30 full-time roles created. Has there been any thought to part-time roles, and also the commitment to 24 hours per year to provide career talks and similar advice sort of things? Has there been any decisions made as to when that time will be in regards to weekends versus weekdays, 2 hours a month versus 4 hours every other month, and so on?
That's a keen question, that was.
John, can I just make a point before you? I think the way that the report's written as well, it's 30 full-time equivalent, so that will that will include some part-time as well. It's just the way that I wrote the report. Sorry.
That's what I was going to say. No, it's and that's just from Dan's. Well, when we've looked at the contract and we looked at the plan, that there's 700 people transferring to us. There's a full expectation that the amount of departments that we've got will be expanding. You can't do everyone active without having more people, more instructors, more colleagues to reset people when they come in, more people to kind of support the services. So we fully expect it to be much broader. We've recently run a recruitment couple of days, which led to the recruitments that we've currently got. That's pretty common in the way in which we approach it. We run lots of training development to training courses to qualify people. Gone are the days that you could put an ad out that automatically gains you qualified people. More often than not, we're developing people from apprentices onwards going forward. And we learned, particularly after COVID, you had to grow your own. Before COVID, it was an easier recruitment market, but we've had to learn. But that's something that we as an organisation we highly depend on. Does that answer your? Okay.
Just to add with the 24 hours commitment, to give you a simple answer, we haven't got to the detail of that yet. However, it's part of our community outreach plan, so part of the first sort of probably initial stages all the way through to 9 months of the initial year of the initial year's contract it will be about working, developing partnerships with schools and local educational providers, and that's when we'll start working up the times and dates, and you know, we'll be completely flexible in when those programmes can be worked with. It'll be evenings and weekends as well as daytimes as well, to be completely flexible, depending on the need, but it's all about development of that programme after over the first sort of 12 months. And we will be reporting back to the council as per the specification with regards to, you know, the commitment to that and how we're succeeding with that, along with the social value commitments and everything. So hopefully there'll be updates,
And then we'll
progressive
report
updates
to committee.
Yeah. So more to follow on that detail.
Great first question. We are running a bit behind schedule, so can I take Karen and Marianne's question together, please?
Yeah, mine's just a comment really. It's about golf courses, which you won't be surprised to say in Burnley. So it's just to say, if any changes are happening, can you keep us abreast as local councillors? That's all, so we're not getting it from local users or the staff, and we know what's happening. That's all it is. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Mine's just a quick one based on emails I've been receiving. So part of it was about the community team, so I think you've covered that and the approach to that and the fact that people want more provision. But the other is about classes, so, you know, your aerobics and whatnot. People are asking me, like, are they going to stop, are they going to change, and when's that information going to become available? So, I mean, yeah, maybe just...
Okay. In our sector, whether you like it or whether you don't, fitness is hugely significant as an individual activity area. We've got some early investments that are going into 5 of the clubs which will happen in April, May and June, and we know that our financial plan is predicated on a substantial increase in the number of people using the facilities. Now that's partly down to actually the investments that are going to take place at certain times in the contract, but also just on the current exchange, we know that you know, fitness developments are a good opportunity. We've got some pretty good stats that indicate where people have in their gym membership, where people undertake a second or even a third activity like group exercise or swimming or maybe personal training, they stay significantly longer. So our Group X programs are pretty substantial. So we'd be increasing Group X, not reducing Group X. We have significant relationships with organisations like Les Mills. We have a lot of online services that are available. So I think the studios will be under more pressure, not less pressure, with us, not the other way around. And we're going to open the health suites back open again, saunas, spas, etc., which are closed at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think that's a good point that exercise isn't just an activity, it is a social thing as well. So getting that is really important. Well, thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation and questions. I believe, have you got your Christmas party this evening, I think?
It might have started in my absence.
You're going to have some catching up to do then.
Yeah, but in true tradition, we're playing cricket tonight, so... Well, Yorkshiremen playing cricket, that would have to be the way, wouldn't it? So yes, it is. So jump back on a train and then back into Birmingham. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you for accommodating me.
No, thank you for coming over. It's really interesting to hear about how the next 15 years are going to shape up.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks
excellent.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invite.
So, on to the formal bit now. The report contains recommendations for noting on page 35, and that will also include the drafting amendment that Lisa mentioned earlier. Are we all agreed to note this report? Agreed. Excellent. That was passed unanimously. So thank you again to the officers and for everyone active for all the work that they've done on this. It's I think to say it's been a major project is a bit of an understatement. I hope that you do get some rest after it's all been implemented. So thank you, everybody. So item 9 now, this can be found from page 45 of the agenda pack, and it is regarding allotment rents. I believe that Rowan Longhurst is presenting the report. Have we got James as well? Or is it just Rowan? Oh, James is ill. Oh, well, we send our best wishes to James. Perfect. Over to you.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Rowan Longhurst. I'm the service manager for Countryside. The allotment service sits in my area. My allotment manager, James, sends his apologies. Yes, unfortunately, he's ill today. So this item and the associated report seeks approval for a 2% increase in allotment rent and water charges for the period 2026-27. So for colleagues who may not have a full understanding of everything the allotment service delivers, I'll just give you a short overview and the context to the decision. So the provision of allotments is a statutory duty, and currently as a council we provide about 3,400 allotment plots across the city and across 70 or so very varied sites. Tenants rent a plot, and this can vary in size, and it can vary in terms of the water provision that they receive. The service is entirely funded by rents. Those societies, who are often constituted groups on sites, though not all sites, are supported by our service to access grants and funds that we otherwise can't access ourselves. And we facilitate improvements to those sites and encourage societies who are volunteer run to do the work that they can alongside our allotment office to maintain those sites. So our tenants must be given 12 months notice or more for any changes in rent, hence why we come to you at this time of year to seek approval for the year more than a year in advance. So in this instance it's for 2026-27. Often this annual lag results in pressure on our budgets, so we have seen significant inflationary rates over the last couple of years, but it has come down, and at the point we consulted our allotment advisory group in July, the proposal was in line with inflation at that time and 2%. So this rental increase obviously allows us, the service, to maintain staffing levels, to maintain and where possible improve our sites and continue the management and governance of the service. Our service, compared to other core cities, offers a generous concessionary structure. So this can be between 25 and 75% discount. And currently, about 35% of our tenants access this discount, and you can see a breakdown of that in the report. The allotment service supports a wide range of outcomes in the Sheffield Plan and city goals. Of course, they're very valued and treasured green spaces across the city and embedded in a whole range of our communities. They contribute to this wider patchwork of green space, and they offer a local space where communities can grow healthy, nutritious, fresh food, if they're lucky, depending on the weather, and obviously a place to socialise, be active and to relax. So we very much know that our allotment service, as well as providing a space for the cultivation of food, is so much more than that, and absolutely treasured by our tenants. So in the context of this report, we're seeking approval for a 2% increase for allotment rents in 2026-27. If you have any further questions, I'd be delighted to answer them.
Thank you very much for that report. Do we have any questions? No questions? Oh, one, yeah. Councillor Elliott.
Just wanted to make a quick comment, if that's okay, rather than a question, because I'm a member of the Allotments Advisory Group, and I went along last week to the celebration event, and I just wanted to say how lovely it was, and really joyful and positive, and people from different allotments came and gave presentations on all sorts of different things. So I just wanted to say thanks to James for all his work on that, but he's not here, so can you pass that on?
Yeah, definitely. I'll pass it on. And I agree. It was a really fabulous event, and it was really special and uplifting to hear from groups across all sorts of sites in the city, the work that they're doing off the back of all of the hard work of the office. There's so much more that our societies are doing and cracking on with for the benefit of their tenants. So and hopefully we can share that. Part of the reason for the event in that way was so that other groups can learn from other groups in the city about what works, what funds to go after, what help to ask for, and just share those skills. So thank you, I'll pass that on.
Thank you. It is worth noting that the allotments team are incredibly hard-working, and I think that we're hearing from you about some of the work that's been done later in the municipal year, so that'll be really exciting. We'll look forward to that. If there's no further comments, the report contains recommendations for approval on page 46. Are we all agreed? Perfect. That recommendation was carried unanimously. Thank you, Rowan. There you go. So we now move on to item 10 of the agenda. This is the City Centre Public Spaces Protection Order and can be found from page 61 of the agenda pack. Presenting this report is Jason Siddle, Ben Brailsford, Tom Smith, James D and Superintendent Paul Ferguson. I have received an amendment to this item as well via email. We will hear from the officers with regards to the report first, and then we'll go straight into an overview of the amendment, so then members can discuss it all together when we open up for discussion, if that's okay. So I believe that there's a quick presentation on this. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Tom Smith, Director of Customer Experience and Communities. I'll be handing over to Jason to do a brief presentation. Just before he does, just a couple of quick things right at the start that I thought was worth making a point around. So since this committee agreed a consultation around a PSPO back in January, we've undertaken a huge amount of work, both in response to the consultation and response to the concerns that have been raised around the powers. It's worth saying straight from the off, the powers within this PSPO are not about stopping homelessness. They're not designed to do that. They were never designed to do that. They're not about dealing with vulnerability. These are powers in particular to deal with behaviours and antisocial behaviours very specifically. They're not linked to particular groups of people. We've done a lot of work to look to make sure the powers don't adversely affect vulnerable people, and hopefully actually the powers support vulnerable people into support as we move through this. It gives us, you know, as we go through this process, we would always give anybody the opportunity just to stop doing the thing that they're doing that is antisocial behaviour. We will see in the report, and as Jason works through, we've got a number of supportive measures in terms of notices of intended action, a new harm reduction pathway based on local and national best practice. And as I say, these powers can actually be supportive in some respects because they allow us to better identify vulnerable people in the city centre and better identify the actions that we need to take to support those people into interventions and support. It's also worth saying, you know, not all ASB in the city centre, in fact the vast majority of ASB is not committed by vulnerable people actually. These powers aren't currently in place, so people who are, you know, being antisocial behaviour or urinating up a shop front when they've been to a bar or something, we currently don't have powers in place to deal with that across the enforcement organisations of the council or the police. Powers aren't unusual. 90% of police authorities in this country have got at least one PSPO in place, so this is a tried and tested mechanism for dealing with these things. So say very much aimed to make the city safe for everyone, and lots of our vulnerable users of the city centre are as much victims of ASB as anyone else. So I just wanted to say that at the outset, and Jason will have a run through a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jason Siddall. I'm the Head of Communities at Sheffield City Council. I'm just going to run through a quick presentation which kind of sets the background in terms of the outcomes of the consultation, just a little bit more detail. And know Councillor Crossland actually touched on a lot of this in responses to the public questions earlier, so apologies if some of this is a repeat, but I think it's worth probably going through just for the meeting and just for completeness. So in terms of the consultation feedback, members will be aware, councillors will be aware that we came here earlier this year and asked for a decision to go out to public consultation, and that was agreed by this committee, and we did that. In terms of the response rate, we had 1,205 individuals and 77 organisations respond to the consultation, which actually, in context, is a really high response rate compared to a lot of the consultations that we do. There are some that have had bigger responses, but this is up there, you know, in terms of interest. Clearly, there was a lot of interest and a lot of people responded. So the headlines were that a significant majority of individuals, organisations and landowners who responded to the consultation had witnessed or experienced antisocial behaviour over the last 12 months in the city centre. A further set of behaviours were identified as issues by respondents. So aggressive and violent behaviour, loud religious preaching, littering and bike deliverers, or riders on pavements, for example, and there were a number of other things that were identified, which are in the body of the full report. There's quite an extensive section of the report that sets out what those other things were and what the response to that is. Obviously, councillors can refer to that. Just over 2/3 of individual respondents thought Sheffield City Council should introduce a PSPO in the city centre, and a high proportion, 87% of organisations, agreed with the introduction. So just a little bit more granular detail around that. 82% of individuals and 92% of organisations had experienced antisocial behaviour in the last 12 months, and the majority agreed or strongly agreed that the issues that were set out in the draft public spaces protection order were a problem in the city centre. A consistent proportion, 1/6 of individuals who responded disagreed or strongly disagreed with each antisocial behaviour identified, with the exception of drug use, which had a lower disagreement rate, so we didn't get everybody agreeing. There were some individuals that clearly had strong views and in their response disagreed with this. The issues that stood out for individuals were drug use. 79% of individual respondents strongly agreed or agreed. Begging was 74%, and drinking alcohol in public 73%. So quite a high number of agreement with the prohibitions that had been set out in the draft PSPO. The issues that stood out for organisations were drug use, drinking alcohol in public, and public urination or defecation. So in terms of support for the PSPO, 67% of individuals were in support of the introduction of a PSPO, whilst 12% disagreed. Just for the record, obviously that doesn't add up to 100. We had some people who neither disagreed or agreed, so kind of sat on the fence in their response. However, nearly a quarter of individual respondents disagreed with the specific restrictions on begging and alcohol. 531 individuals that answered yes, and 221 who answered no gave further comments. 87% of organisations were in support, with 4% disagreeing, and 49% of organisations that answered yes and 6 who answered no gave further comments. Just on to experience of antisocial behaviour, 43% of individuals and 55% of organisations identified that there were other antisocial behaviour issues not captured in the PSPO report. I've just referred to that in the earlier slide, and there were 16 specific issues that were identified. 12 of those were covered by existing legislation, and of the remaining 4, the right to preach is protected by the European Convention on Human Rights. Charity collections are covered by the Fundraising Regulator Code of Fundraising Practice. Issues relating to noise or loudness are only a statutory nuisance if they unreasonably and substantially interfere with the use or enjoyment of the home or other premises. And dangerously out of control dogs are covered by the Dangerous Dogs Act. As I say, there's a lot more detail in the main body of the report around this particular issue that councillors can refer to for information. So in terms of the area covered by the Public Spaces Protection Order, the proposed area in the consultation, 68% of individual respondents and 78% of organisational respondents agreed with the proposed boundary of the Public Spaces Protection Order. And of those that disagreed, 153 individual and 10 organisational respondents said that the area should be bigger, and 47 individual and no organisational respondents said it should be smaller. The evidence does not currently support extending the PSPO to the areas that were proposed. However, if it is implemented, there's an opportunity to review and amend the Public Spaces Protection Order. And again, in the main body of the report, there's a lot more information and detail about that particular aspect. So what changes did we make as a result of the consultation? So there were several changes made to the proposed begging and loitering restrictions to make the wording less ambiguous and less subjective. So comments that were received were that members of the public who responded and gave a written response in the consultation said, you know, can you please make sure that this is more explicit, that it's clearer to people, and so we made those changes. The restriction on alcohol has been amended to situations that are causing or likely to cause antisocial behaviour rather than a blanket restriction on all alcohol consumption. Councillors may recall the original proposal was if you are carrying an open vessel of alcohol, officers will be authorised to take that off you regardless of the scenario. I think we got quite a lot of feedback from councillors and through the consultation that people didn't think that that was proportionate, so we amended the Public Spaces Protection Order as a result. Following discussions with South Yorkshire Police, a requirement to provide a name, address and date of birth and to leave the restricted area for 24 hours for breaching the order has been added. And this provides us an alternative intervention that will help to avoid more formal intervention, such as issuing a fixed penalty notice. If an individual has a reasonable excuse for entering the area during that time, such as attending support services or accommodation, then this will be permitted. Okay, so I'm not going to read those out. That information's in all of the pack that you've received in terms of revised PSPO restrictions, but they're there for the record in the presentation. Okay, so we touched on this through the responses to the questions that we received earlier, but just to go through this, an enforcement and support protocol will define the key principles. So the first one being that education, advice and prevention is the first priority. The restrictions will apply to everyone and enforcement will be fair and proportionate. And in most cases, the opportunity to cease the activity will be given. Support can and will be offered to address underlying causes of antisocial behaviour. Officers may require someone to leave the area for 24 hours. Further action will be taken for non-compliance or where there are repeat offences. An antisocial behaviour notice of intended action, NIA for short, process will ensure that action is taken based on the circumstances, and fixed penalty notices up to a maximum of £100 will be used, but not as the default response. I just want to make that clear because I know there were some questions earlier about this, and again, they've been published online in terms of the approach to using fixed penalty notices. Staff patrol resources will be prioritised in the areas where ASB is more likely to occur, and that can be a fluid situation. So quite clearly, you know, we have no expectation that officers will be everywhere at all times within the boundary of the Public Spaces Protection Order. I think most people would agree that's not actually possible to do, but we will do some dynamic assessment of where the priorities are, and we'll use resources accordingly. And that could be fluid over time. Some of you may be familiar with the Laszlo triangle. We tried to set this out in a graphical form to kind of explain the approach, if you like, in terms of the enforcement and support protocol. So the triangle kind of demonstrates that a lot where most of the action will occur, if you like, and that's at the bottom of the triangle, the fattest part of the triangle. So prevention, so signage and publicity and education will be more where we will do more of the work and put more of the effort in, if you like. And then you can see, without me reading it out all verbatim, it's in the report as well, that advice and guidance will be second, and then requirement and direction, a notice of intended action. And then, you know, the FPN, fixed penalty notice, legal enforcement and prosecution right at the top of the triangle. So, you know, we don't want and are not expecting that to be the main, where we take most of our, or make most of our efforts in terms of this public spaces protection order. It's very much towards the bottom end of the triangle, and that's the approach that we're going to take. So, a new process developed alongside the Public Spaces Protection Order and central to our enforcement support protocol is the Notice of Intended Action. And this will be used when further action needs to be considered after a PSPO breach. It will be a tool for frontline officers to ensure visible action is taken at the time of the breach. And it ensures that consideration of individual circumstances is made by appropriate services in determining the necessary action and making sure that vulnerable people access the appropriate support pathway. It demonstrates that fixed penalty notices will not be the default response and will only be used when necessary. And just finally, the final slide, in terms of the Equalities Impact Assessment, the restrictions contained in the Public Spaces Protection Order apply to everyone, and it's possible that certain groups of people may be more likely to breach the order than others due to circumstances such as addiction. Action has been taken to mitigate potential impacts, and this has included the revision of the draft restrictions to remove some of the ambiguity and subjectiveness and the development of the enforcement and support protocol as described. Enforcement of the Public Spaces Protection Order will be fair, reasonable and focused on holistic problem solving, including addressing support needs where necessary. And the enforcement and support protocol creates procedural safeguards to ensure that support and signposting are prioritised over enforcement. Again, there's a lot more detailed information in the documents that you've received that describe that, including the actual enforcement support protocol and the EIA. They're the recommendations. I'm not going to read them out, Chair. Sorry, someone's trying to call me. I'm not going to try and read those out, Chair. They're there, and obviously I'll leave those up on the screen while we have the conversation. So, any questions? Thank you, Chair.
Before we do open it up for questions, as I said, we have had a proposed amendment. I think so. We have a full discussion about everything on the table today. If Rob, do you want to give a brief overview of your proposed amendment? We'll do the formal proposition and seconding as further in the meeting, if that's okay. But yeah, a brief overview of.
So I believe that the amendment up on the screen is not the one that I added to. That still references 6 months from the date of implementation. Bear with us.
I haven't had time to check my emails because I've been chairing a meeting.
I sent an updated version of it to Robert, just as because a few of the words were changed, so I do apologise.
We can work
what
on
I can
that,
do. What I can do is I can talk. I can give a verbal listing of the amendments as proposed, and they will be featured up on screen. So the amendment is to add one recommendation that a 6-month review is taking place 6 months from the date of implementation on the 1st of April 2025. This review will come to Council at the closest committee to that and will feature representations from organisations representing the businesses of the city centre, voluntary and faith organisations, and I would like to thank also Alex from Ben Centre for coming along and making representations via questions. I did want to make it, it's up. And South Yorkshire Police and Sheffield City Council. The one thing I didn't want to make a point of is making sure that we as a committee could examine the positions of each one of these, because I do realise in the consultation that organisations such as the Chamber of Commerce and voluntary and faith organisations have been put through the filter of council officers, so I did want us as a committee to have that opportunity to examine their positions. I also wanted, the recommendations renumbered, but also a number of the comments made by councillors and I know outside organisations have commented on the fact of there is no positive behaviour change and provision to prevent these behaviours from happening, but rather this is a a system of displacement of these behaviours, and I did want to see if we could and recommend that an overarching cross-committee strategy to reduce these behaviours, not just to displace them, is started, and that this will go across committees. So, for example, alcohol and drug taking, talking about things like health and social care, mental health provision in the city, begging and loitering can include housing, but also urination and defecation. I do want to comment on the letter that we received from Tim Renshaw at the Arch Project about the lack of public toilets in the city centre. It's often been commented on by older members of our communities that this is not an accessible situation in our cities regarding those with health needs. But I'm also conscious of the lack of public toilets available for all members of the community, including those people that, that suffer from homelessness and rootlessness, that this is exacerbating the problem with urination and defecation in our public spaces. So I would like to see a broad overarching cross-committee strategy to look at each one of these situations and identify how we can positively improve them rather than just looking at displacement of these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. In terms of the amendment itself, we'll see what people think, but if we need to take 5 minutes of reading through it without focusing on a meeting, then that's what we'll do. I understand that this is a very important and big decision for the council, and I just want everybody to be able to make that decision as informed as they can be. Tom, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder whether it was worth, before we get into the debate, me just being really clear about what the recommendation is and what it isn't, and what we would have to do in terms of decision making around PSPO from a process perspective in the future. So, Public Spaces Protection Order is put in place through a process which we are following, which is that the committee recommends a consultation, we undertake a consultation, and then the committee takes a decision to implement a PSPO. In exactly the same way, if we were to cease or change or extend the PSPO, we would have to follow that process again. So I believe what Councillor Rees is recommended is not that we restart that process or even that we come back with a recommendation to restart that process. What we are doing at that 6-month point is providing a review point for this committee to consider what has happened over the 6 months of implementation of that order, for the committee to then decide what they want to do going forward. If the committee at that point then decide that they want to do something with the order, then we would need to follow that same process. So I just wanted to be really clear on process in terms of decision making before the debate began.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm probably speaking in old terms now, but it gives the committee an opportunity to call it in effect. I know that's old cabinet speak, but that's kind of what it is. Shall we open it up for overall discussion first? So we've got Laura and Rob raising their hands and Maria. I'm going to write everybody's names down.
Could I just provide context on what Tom's just said? There is, and I do agree with Tom that this would not be a formal. The cost and complication of a public consultation has been considered. It's that a lot of the conversation around this has been hypothetical. We wanted, or I would like to see what the actual realised impact of this PSPO is, and therefore a further decision can be made at that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So questions. We've got Laura first.
Thank you, Chair. Rob, I understand your amendment. I would have liked to have seen this before we got into committee, actually, so we could have had a discussion about it and the implications, because I think I'm being asked to just do things on the hoof now, which isn't the best way of decision making. So it's a point. And I thought anyway, I don't know if I'm wrong, Jason, but there was going to be ongoing review and monitoring of this anyway. It says that in the report, doesn't it?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, it does. At section 2.11, I think, in the report, talks about the need for review and building in that review through the regular briefings that we do to the committee on a weekly basis. So knowledge briefs, as we call them.
Because I think we do need to.
Yeah.
There could be unintended consequences that none of us have realised. So there does need to be an ongoing review and continued engagement with stakeholders. And I was reassured that that would be part of the process. So I just want that confirming. Thank you.
It's confirmed in the report. I think it supports Councillor Rees's recommendation in the report, yeah.
Thank you. So, Marianne? Sorry, got to you quicker than I thought.
Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. I've got a few questions, hopefully some of them will be quite quick. Just turning to the consultation responses, I just wanted to clear something up because there's something that confused me, so apologies. 100, so page 119, 120 and 121. So it says 872 out of the 1,205 people who completed the consultation gave further comments. And then it suggests that of those, 52% were negative. Is that right?
Thanks, Councillor. I can only comment on what the report says, and so if you're reading the report verbatim, then I would have to say that report, that's correct, yeah. The report was done independently of the team that have been working on the public spaces protection order, and that report was provided to us. So if that's what it says in the report, then yes, but I've not got it up in front of me, so I'll take your word for it, Councillor, that that's what it is.
Okay, thanks. And there was the other bit about the organisations as well. So 57 out of 77 of the organisations who gave comments, those comments were either neutral or mixed or negative. So none of them were supportive. So yeah, I just think that's an interesting point of those people who actually bothered to give it some further reflective thought, you know, weren't particularly positive about the proposals. So my first question is, this new proposed power to move people, the dispersal element, obviously that hasn't been consulted on because that's been added. Just a quick question on that. If someone lives within the zone, the proposed PSBO zone, what happens?
So my name is Paul Ferguson. I'm the Superintendent for Neighbourhood Policing in Sheffield. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Chair. So there's some parallels to this for the way that the short-term Section 34, Section 35 power is used, and that's around proportionality of a response. So it's about a conversational understanding where somebody lives, and what we wouldn't do and couldn't do is disperse someone away from the home. That would be entirely counterproductive. So what I would envisage this power to be used is for scenarios where we've got people who are visiting the city centre and potentially drinking to excess and causing disorderly, disruptive behaviour. It'd be a means to effectively instruct them to leave the city centre, go back home, go away, and lessen their impact upon the wider public. So for people who are resident, it would be inappropriate, unjustifiable to try and cause them to be away from their home.
Okay, thanks, that makes sense. And then with regards to the wording, we've still got supermarkets and banks being given extra protection. So this doesn't say shops, which could have included like independents and small businesses. So just wondered, why does it still say supermarkets, not cafes, restaurants, etc.?
Which part of the, are you referring to, Councillor? Sorry.
I think it's a summary of changes regarding loitering on page 68.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is that it includes anywhere. I think it's fair to say. So there were examples given. I don't think that we want to be absolutely specific that it's only supermarkets and not independent shops or businesses. I'm sorry if that's the you know, the conclusion that's been reached from the wording, but that's not the intention. So yeah, point taken, but it's not an exclusive list.
Okay, thanks. And then on to the the comments from the frontline services, so we've got, you know, Ben Centre, the Archer Project, etc. So I was expecting to see like a section with their comments, you know, organisations that are dealing with the impacts of these social issues day in and day out, but they're not highlighted. I don't see that they've been given any particular credit, or is there a reason for that?
No, there's no specific reason for that. You know, I think the report refers to the fact that we've taken on board all comments, including the comments from the organisations that you've mentioned there, Councillor. We just have to bear in mind also that when we do a consultation, we do say to people who respond to that consultation that we won't disclose who they are or what they've said. It's part of the consultation process that the council follow. But I can assure you that those comments were taken into account from those organisations as described in the presentation and the papers.
Can I just jump in to say that we do only have, I think it's half an hour left of the meeting, and everybody will want an input on this. So would you mind just listing off your questions, if that's okay?
Yeah, shall we have a vote on extending the meeting? Because I don't think half an hour is going to be enough, is it?
Let's see how we go. So,
we've had an amendment which I didn't know if we've accepted or not. We seem to have moved into debate. That amendment, it's sent to already be included in the report, so I'm a little bit astray.
yeah, sorry about, I can clarify. So the reason that I asked for the amendment to be brought before us all before opening the debate was so we could debate everything all at once. We haven't voted on an amendment.
Is there still an amendment? Because it was saying some of the amendment was already in the report, so I don't know if there is one. That's all I was asking.
I believe that if Councillor Rice wants to push forward with an amendment, then it's his right to do so. It's less of it's more adding a stronger recommendation with regards to the review. The review process is included in the report. My understanding is that Councillor Rice wants sort of to bring that review to CPL committee 6 months after the implementation, and that is included in the recommendation.
So I'll just list, because I would like to first apologise for the tardiness in bringing this amendment. Last week was incredibly busy and just trying to get stuff through, so I do want to offer my apologies on this, and I think Kurt summed up my reasoning for the amendment. I do, in the report, note the kind of the ongoing review through briefings, but I do want it as part of the recommendation that there is a formal review that is captured in the minutes with a report associated alongside it, so that we all, as a council, as a full council, can examine that, and that hopefully the recommendation number 6 is pretty self-explanatory. Obviously I can't recommend that we have a vote now, but if it's within council procedures, just to clear up as to what we're discussing, I'm more than happy to.
So Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services. So my reading is that the Chair's desire was to have a rounded discussion, so to put the prospect of the amendment on the table early, so you have a round debate across all the issues. If there is a desire to press ahead with the amendment, there'll need to be a formal proposal. That'll need to be seconded. You'll then have a narrow debate on the amendment itself, and take a vote on the amendment, and then you'll go back to the substantive. But I think the intention of having everything on the table early on was so that members and anybody watching could really hear across the entire set of issues in one go, rather than having to sort of perhaps artificially repeat the two things. So, Chair, I think that's my interpretation of where we are.
Yeah, thank you for that. But if you want to push ahead with the amendment first, then that's what we do. No? Yeah, we'll carry on with questions and answers then. So I had Rob down for. Can we do some more questions first, and then I'll come back to you, Marianne, if that's okay.
Mine are in particular around, there's a new respect order that was announced by the government in Westminster November, a few weeks ago now, and I'm just wondering how that interacts with the PSPO, especially regarding a number of the antisocial behaviours that are listed. I think kind of alcohol misuse and drug misuse are encompassed within this respect. Has that been considered, this update regarding this?
So really briefly, just to say we know about the order, but at the moment there are no timetable for the actual adoption of that yet. So we know it's potentially coming. I guess the review that's been recommended may take account of that if that law comes to pass later in the year. As I said earlier on, the council always has the option, following a consultation and a decision of this committee, to amend or discharge the order ultimately. So if that new power did come into place and there was any duplication, we would obviously have the potential to be able to reflect it then.
And very quickly, for Superintendent Ferguson, there has been a well-publicised £65 million shortfall in South Yorkshire policing budget. Has there been any impact from, or expected impact to frontline policing in terms of discharging the powers in this PSPO that this shortfall will have?
So there's this will be primarily policed from a policing perspective by the Central Neighbourhood team. That's a well-resourced team. That is, as far as I can possibly predict, that will continue to be fully staffed, and they will be at the forefront of working with this order if it's granted. From my position, that means that there's three teams, one inspector, 3 sergeants, constables, PCSOs working for them, who we can invest in training and so they fully understand how the order could work, what its meaning is, what its intent is. So I can be really assured that that team of police officers work with wardens and other staff to get this interpreted as we intend. It wouldn't be exclusive, so another officer would, but more than likely it'll be that small team that will be at the forefront of this.
Thank you for that. Karen?
Yeah, thank you. It's just to say that thank you for reiterating that people will be supported and it's not a first. I think that goes a long way to make them feel a bit more comfortable. I know this is a really hard decision. I want to go back to what the amendment was, because you mentioned toilets, and that's something that's a concern to me, getting older as well.
I wouldn't say.
I just wondered if there's anything we can do about that. I don't think it actually affects, I don't know if we can do that on outside of this or make it part of this, but I do think it's an issue we have to look at seriously if we want to deal with that issue that the Arch Project brought to us attention. So just wanted to put that out there as a request. Thank you.
It's a very good point. I'm not entirely sure what committee public toilets would fall under, but whichever street scene, yeah, it would be. I think that we should probably speak to the officers within that committee, and because it's hard in a committee system because you can't make decisions in silos. Every decision seems to impact another committee, but I do think we should raise that with the relevant officers. Yeah, definitely. Oh, Tom's got it, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make one very brief point in relation to toilets. I don't think I would disagree with any of what's been said in terms of the provision of public toilets and the impact potentially on a number of different groups within the city. I would want to make clear, though, that our protocols that we'll be putting in place and everything we'll be putting in place to support vulnerable people, my expectation is we will not be giving somebody a fixed penalty notice if they simply, if they couldn't get access to a toilet. We will have safeguards in place to ensure that that's not the case. As I said earlier on in my very brief presentation at the start, the person who is urinating down an alley up the side of somebody's business after being to the pub on a Saturday night, that's not because they couldn't find a public toilet. They've literally just walked out of a pub. You know, and at the moment we have no powers to deal with that antisocial behaviour, and that is antisocial behaviour. That's not to do with not being able to find a public toilet. If people genuinely can't find a public toilet, they won't be subject to enforcement action. That's not what these powers are about.
Thank you. So I have seen indications from Willis, Mark. We'll come back to Marianne as well. Oh. Perfect. So Willis.
Oh, thank you, Chair. In relation to 2.4, it mentions that additional areas for the PSPO were proposed within the consultation. That's the word, consultation. Thank you. And it says that they were reviewed as to whether or not the restrictions within the PSPO were applicable to them, and also reviews it against the report rate of said things that do apply to the PSPO. In that review, what work was done to acknowledge and accommodate for the fact that antisocial behaviour does go unreported for a variety of reasons? And also, the reports that were considered, were those only police reports or were organisations pertaining to security? So, for example, the Sheffield Hallam University and University of Sheffield security services, were those consulted about whether or not students had reported to them antisocial behaviour, and was that factored, taken into account in that review? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the areas that were proposed outside of the boundary, I think that's what you're asking. Yeah. So what we did is we looked at those areas and we considered whether the evidence, so that's the police evidence or the evidence that the council held in terms of reports of antisocial behaviour, were the same as the proposed restrictions in the public spaces protection order within the proposed boundary. And what we found is that there weren't. There were different issues that potentially the PSPO wouldn't solve or help to solve. So it could be quite tempting, if I'm going to be candid about it, to say, well, what we'll do is we'll just make this easy and we'll move the boundary a little bit because someone wanted it there. The problem with that is that you kind of overpromise and then underdeliver, because you move the boundary to deal with issues and try to deal with issues that the actual prohibitions can't, because they're different issues. So that doesn't mean, though, that we wouldn't do anything about issues in other parts of the city where, people have said, look, we've got issues and problems, can you come and look at that? And that's what we do. So it could be, for example, that where we got recommended areas, that we have a different type of action plan, and we work with local councillors and local organisations to look at what the issues are in that particular area, what actions we can take to resolve that. It could be, for example, that there needed to be a specific public spaces protection order for that particular area, for those particular problems, if we felt that there was evidence and a public spaces protection order could help to resolve those issues. And that would, again, involve consultation, as the same process, basically, that we've gone through for this particular public spaces protection order. Or it might not be that the answer is a public spaces protection order for that area. It might be a different action plan. It might be something that the police do as part of their police action plans in that area, working with local neighbourhood police, etc. So there's a range of different options, but I think the answer to it is that we would always involve the stakeholders in that particular area, whether they be businesses or tenants, residents, or whoever, and local councillors, of course. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you. So Mark next.
You've made it very clear in the report that it is a minority of people who are actually homeless or suffering from mental health issues, and yet the public is continuously jumping to the conclusion that we have a downer on those people. We obviously have to get it clear to people that we don't. But the setup as it is at the moment does have to change. People are intimidated. We're not going to get inward investment into the city if executives from elsewhere walk around and see all the beggars. I was particularly impressed by the discussion that we all got from the Archer project over the term disruption. They were giving the impression, and I think they were correct, that so many of the people we do see on the streets, what the Elizabethans used to call the sturdy beggars, are choosing this almost as a lifestyle and turning up there as a job of work, you know, 10 in the morning till 6 at night or whatever. And, and they're not actively looking for support. The term disruption the Archer project was using, if you could just disrupt their routine, move them on and discourage them, disrupt their coziness with that kind of lifestyle, that would be important. But for those who do have mental health issues and the homeless, is there actually enough support when we're talking about giving them support? Thank you.
So we're working with the Archer project and other stakeholders, so particularly mental health service provision on a joint piece of work around the problems within the city centre. Certainly from a policing perspective, we receive correspondence very frequently about the conditions and position within the city centre. What I personally feel is it feels like we, the police, being asked to deal with some of the symptoms of some issues which are much further down the line. That's the bit we really want to work on to try and resolve some of those situations. It's really key that the Archer project are actively involved in that work, because they're a huge supporter and a huge service to people in significant need of mental health, physical health, addiction services. We don't want to undermine that, but what we do, keep going back to that key word of behaviours. Behaviours of the few are having a huge impact upon the majority, and that's where we want additional means to target that behaviour. The whole point of a PSPO is that currently our options are almost to ignore or arrest. Almost wait until somebody's committed a criminal offence and then arrest. What PSPO can do is put in incremental phases before then that could prevent that more serious harm, that could prevent that arrest. And that's the ethos, I think, of what the PSPO was originally introduced for and what we want to embody. I hope that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you raised a very good point about how the PSPO gives us steps along the way. This isn't about the final fixed penalty notices. This is about every interaction that we have with people and the behaviour change that we can offer and the support that we can offer along the way as well. I think that's something that Sheffield is doing better. That's something that we should be proud of in the proposed PSPO as well. So next up.
Thanks. I've just got a few more questions, but just going back to what we were discussing before, I just want to make the point that it does seem really disproportionate that the same weight is given to like an individual who doesn't even live in the city centre, like 13% of the people who responded, or someone who hardly even goes into town, you know, as one of these organisations that works providing support. And it did actually say in the Q&A that was published in December that providers would continue to be involved throughout, and it's really disappointing to see that the academics said they weren't contacted again. So just a few comments about really the process could have been a bit more thorough. So just in terms of the comments from the Archer project, I presume everyone's received the letter. So I really welcome this sort of concept of the graduated harm reduction approach. But what's your response to the comments? So they say they're not convinced that the support element contained in the report has been addressed sufficiently, and reference to support systems that already exist seem to be the basis of the support element, but they don't join up. And I wondered why we don't have a similar piece of work. We've got the enforcement and it's very clear and there's a nice little diagram, but we don't have a similar piece of work done on the support element.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I think it's quite challenging. The report's very, very long already. There's a lot of detail being provided in that report already. And I think that there's a balance between, making that report double the size, potentially, if we describe every single process, policy that we've got around homelessness and preventing rough sleeping, and all of those policies are referred to in the actual report themselves. and they do exist. We do have a city centre action plan. There are lots of meetings that go on in the city centre with some of the agencies that we've been talking about in terms of having a joined up response to some of the challenges that we've got in the city centre. Superintendent Ferguson talked about the work that we're doing with the Archer project, etc. So there's a whole myriad of things that we're doing within the city centre and across the city actually, in terms of harm reduction, supporting people with drug and alcohol issues, etc. Point taken if you think that wasn't fully described in the report, but I can assure you that there are other reports, there are other reference points that we have made in the report, which describe what that looks like. If the order's made, if the decision is made today, then there'll be an implementation phase of that, and we'll be wanting to work with all of those agencies and making sure that we do join up those dots, if you like, for want of a better word, in terms of that enforcement and that support. Is the reason that we introduced the notice of intended action process, so that we're building that safeguard, so we don't just go in and start issuing fixed penalty notices and then walk away and not gathering intelligence about that particular individual who's committing those breaches. What the NIA will allow us to do is make sure if we've got an individual, say for example, that's breaching the order continually, we would, for example, know who they are, what time of day it's happening, what's happening, where it occurred, etc. We'll have far more granular detail than we currently have at the moment, and that detail we will triage in the back office, if you like, in terms of making sure that individual has got the relevant support that they require and they've not fallen through the cracks. So all of those other support mechanisms that are in place, what we see, or what I see, and others in terms of the discussions that we've had, is that the PSPO sits amongst all of that. So if you look at this like a bit of a cake, the PSPO is a slice of the cake with all of the other policies, procedures, and support mechanisms that we've got, and we want the PSPO to fit into that. But there's certainly an opportunity, I think, as Tom said at the beginning, for us to improve the way that we work in the city, and the PSPO could actually be used as a tool for good in doing that, in the way that I've just described.
Thank you. I think I'm going to have to admit defeat, aren't I, and move for a vote to extend the meeting by up to half an hour, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah. But just remember that this is not a target. This is not an aim to achieve. This is a maximum of half an hour from this vote. So if we are all agreed to extend the meeting by half an hour? Agreed. Perfect. Thank you, I suppose. Thank you, everybody. Nabila?
Can I just ask my colleagues questions?
Can we do Nabila first and then we'll come back again? Sorry.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I work quite late evenings in the city centre, my day job, so I can appreciate some of the issues that have been highlighted in the consultation, and I appreciate the reassurances that have been offered today in how it can be implemented. My concern is with the equality impact assessment, and I don't see much reference to disability in the EIA, and we know that some people who exhibit antisocial behaviour, may likely be, or could be, experiencing mental health difficulties, particularly with some instances of like drug use, for instance, or like excessive alcohol use in the city centre that we see repeatedly. If you walk around the city centre, you'll be quite familiar with some characters around the city centre. And also, like, another concern is that, unfortunately, we know that there are instances of discriminatory policing in terms of race, and, despite best efforts, these things do happen. And again, I was quite concerned of the lack of it being in the equality impact assessment, and I was wondering if there was a reason why the council hadn't included race and disability in how they looked at who would be affected by a public space protection order. Again, I appreciate the reassurances that have been given in how it will be implemented, but I think a lot of the concern that we've seen come through the consultation responses is what worst case scenario could look like, and that's something that I'm trying to address with this question.
So, in terms of equality impact assessments, we've undertaken 2 equality impact assessments associated with this process. So we did one back in July 2023, actually, which supported the consultation process, and the previous one And that was very much an exploratory assessment in terms of the possible areas of impact, and that included both disability and race at that stage, alongside all the other protected characteristics, obviously. It very, I suppose this is, in a sense, being really transparent about this, because a lot of the conversation ends up being around, rightly I think, around the concern around people who are homeless and that end of vulnerability. Some of those issues didn't necessarily come out through the consultation then that followed. So how best to explain myself? So when we then did the new EIA that supports this process, again, you look at what is most disproportionately impacted within the assessment. And our assessment process doesn't say, right, well, list the things that you didn't think were disproportionately impacted. It just says put the things in that were. So it looks like you haven't then considered the things that are maybe sort of have been through the consultation, the data and everything else, a lower level of impact in that case. And we didn't have, again, I think probably because of the focus on vulnerability, much in the way of feedback around things like race, to be honest, Councillor Milana. I have to say the reflection post that is that we need to make sure we've got the appropriate monitoring in place to ensure that we don't have issues of discrimination in that space. Absolutely, we'll make sure we do that. Disability in particular was very much considered in the physical disability space, but then when you look at impacts in relation to mental health and addiction, we actually included it within the health section of the assessment. So it's there. It's probably just not as explicit as we would maybe have liked it to have been. So I think probably the one thing I would say is, there's a really good piece of learning there about how we are much more explicit in terms of addressing things within the impact assessment, very specifically the way we structure the assessment itself and bringing out those questions much more formally within this space. But also I think it really speaks to, how we do the ongoing review of this piece of work actually, and how we assure ourselves going forward that we are monitoring these sorts of impacts. We have had feedback on almost like both sides of the equation for the PSP around things like disability. So if I give you one example, I think from a councillor when we met, specifically talking about the impact on mobility actually, in terms of people begging and their ability to then use things like street lines for people who are partially sighted and to be able to move around the city. So it's come from both sides, but it's probably not as explicit in the impact assessment as we would like it to be, and we'd acknowledge that.
Thank you. Finally, Marianne.
Thank you. That is actually one of my colleagues' questions. So the question was from Councillor Malachi Habe, why has there been no race or disability impact assessment conducted for this proposal, and how does the council justify this omission? So do you feel like you've answered that question?
Yeah, we did do a race and disability impact, as I said.
Sorry, got some microphone issues.
Sorry. We did do a race and disability impact. I think what some of this is about how the forms, to be perfectly honest, are presented, and we've had some of that feedback via equality team, and they're going to reflect upon that.
And his other question is, what assessment has the council made of the potential displacement of street drinking and social issues to areas like Hanover, which already face significant challenges? Is that large?
Thanks, Councillor. It has been a consideration throughout all this. Quite a lot of the challenge that we've had is around displacement, and we've had a number of questions on that. What will we do about displacement? I think, as I said previously, we can't completely de-risk the public spaces protection order, and we can't completely preempt what might happen where and when. It could be possible that there is displacement of some of the behaviours. I think the answer to that is that if we will monitor it. It goes back to Councillor Rice's discussion earlier about monitoring and making sure that we're keeping on top of what's happening and evaluating that, and we've got good data and information in terms of the trends should the order be made. What we will do is we will respond to that accordingly, and I think I touched on it in the answer to Councillor Marshall's question really, is that Should we have displacement and that be significant and that become something that's there as a thing and not just a one-off situation, then we will have to respond to that through the range of measures that we've got to respond to that. And that could be, for example, that we review the boundary of the public spaces protection order to bring an area where we've had displacement into the boundary, or it could be something else. But it's very difficult to answer an hypothetical question, if you like. But absolutely, it's right to ask the question that will there be dispersal? Have you considered that? I think the answer to that is yes, but we'll have to consider it further in more detail should it happen. And I think that's the best I can answer that with, if you like. Unless, yeah.
Maybe to add to that, so we've got a long history of policing hotspots. So if a burglary hotspot, for instance, materialises in part of the city, we will put extra resource there to try and deal with that burglary issue. It would be unfortunate if by policing place A, then place B becomes equal problem. That doesn't happen. Generally, you get an overall reduction by putting resource into a place. And I think that would be a similar parallel for what we're talking about here. We have behavioural issues here almost 20, not 24/7, but most days of the week, late days and evenings. By putting the resource in there that's taking this incremental, progressive approach, we'd hope to reduce the overall problem. But as Jason said, that was always the point of the review processes, because we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know. And I suspect we'll probably end up tuning and developing and learning as we go along. Certainly I've worked in 2 different local authorities in South Yorkshire with PSPs in Rotherham and Barnsley, and through good joint policing of the PSPs there has been reductions, and we haven't seen identifiable, recognisable hotspots whereby you do some work here and it pops up there.
But just checking, there is actually no additional resource attached to this order, is there?
So there already is resource working within this footprint. What we're looking to do is give those resources additional options and additional tools to use and implement.
Right, can we move on to the Liberty
I think we
letter
are going
then?
to have to draw this to a close soon. We've been on this for, I think, about an hour now.
I think we need to talk about the Liberty letter then, so we might need to get some legal advice on this, if I can just ask a couple of questions on it, if that's all right.
Quickly.
Yeah, so we received this letter from Liberty on Friday, for the benefit of people who didn't receive it. So, just a quick question on their comments about the provisions being vague and very subjective. So, for example, with the alcohol one, if an officer suspects, etc., etc. So that's putting a lot of onus on the officer to make a decision. What's your comment on that with respect to the comments by Liberty and the general subjectiveness of the provisions?
I'm not sure if there was a legal question there. No?
So, Chair, I'll certainly try and assist. The provisions of the PSPO are in terms of, and I'll try and cover as many points as I can in terms of the Liberty letter, because other members may have received it. The language used in the PSPO is consistent with PSPOs in place in other authority areas. It's also language in terms of its definitions that's drawn from primary legislation. What that tells us is that these are essentially provisions which are tested, in particular in relation to compliance with the Human Rights Act. That's a requirement of primary legislation coming through the process there. The intention with the language used and the definitions used is to use terms that are consistent with other orders and consistent with language in other settings. That's for transparency in terms of the public, but also in terms of those that are charged with applying them. And I think that would speak to interpretations and their precision and the confidence that those that are applying those terms can consider them to be not vague and precise enough. It might be something that our colleagues, officers and the police would like to comment on. But essentially that's the sort of general point. This is language that's consistent with these orders that are in place in other settings, that they are tested and they've been tested through the courts.
and the specific terms are essentially four square with language that's used and drawn from primary legislation, which tells us that it's consistent, but it's also tested in terms of compliance with human rights law and legislation.
Okay, thanks. So can we...
Sorry, Marianne, but we're going to have to move on because we've had...
I think we do need to look at the public sector equality duty, bearing in mind we are all councillors about to make a decision on something and whether our duty has been discharged.
We've given you lots of opportunity to speak in this meeting. We've had however many briefings on this beforehand. We've had 2 pre-meetings before this meeting. There has been lots of opportunity to raise concerns and issues with this. So I've tried to be fair, but I think I am going to have to move over to
With
Karen.
all due respect, Chair, I was expecting to see a full equalities impact assessment, and I think we do need to explore why race and disability were not included.
Fair comment, so I will move over to our legal officer.
Yes, so it's a very important question, isn't it? As the public sector equality duty requires consideration is made of the engaged protected characteristics at the point in time of a decision. I think it came from Tom, but it's also the language of our equalities advisor that the equalities assessment may use different language, but the broad approach is to consider impacts in full across the piece, and that is manifest in the EIA as presented, and that's the professional advice of our equalities officer. And I think Tom has unpacked and explored why this report in this setting today covers the ground. It might not be explicit, but it doesn't mean that it hasn't been considered effectively, and that would be our advice to the committee. Chair.
Thank you very much. Karen?
Yeah, it's just quick. I'm sorry to bring it back to toilets, but...
She always lowers the tone.
But I have got an issue because I understand what you say, that if it's somebody that's come out of a pub that's had an opportunity and they're caught doing it, then that's rightly so. But I'm thinking about someone that is homeless 24/7. Where do they go? 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going to set ourselves up for a fail on this objective of resolving that issue if there's nowhere for them to go. So I can understand you're not taking any action on them, but at the same time, we're not resolving the issue, are we? So there's just something there that I just feel like we're not going to be able to resolve the issue through this if we don't do something about toilets, and I just had to say that. Thank you.
I guess just say I don't disagree with that, actually, and that's probably the point I was making in the sense in that I think it's a wider issue, Councillor McCann.
Right, thank you everybody. I'd also like to commend the work that's been put into this throughout the consultation. It is a massive consultation, and I think that, I must be honest, where a year or 2 ago when it was first floated, I was a bit of a cynic, but then seeing how it's progressed and seeing the different steps, I think that's really important step forward. Seeing the focus on behaviour rather than people, that's a great step forward, and seeing the focus on support and how there will be regular forums with different partners and stakeholders so that vulnerable people who are found through this process are hopefully given the support and the help that they need so that we can create a city centre that's safe, enjoyable and welcoming to everybody. So thank you everybody for that discussion. We have had a proposed amendment. Do you want to go ahead with the vote, or do you want 5 minutes before we... Happy? So is that amendment proposed?
Are we proposing the amendment?
Yep, and is it seconded?
I will second it, Chair.
Perfect. Oh, we need to debate the amendment.
The debate's been very full, so members may be
Yeah.
happy to vote directly.
Is it regarding the amendment? Okay, quickly.
Yeah, with the amendment, so you mentioned a few things that would be useful to look at again. I just think something that was missing from your list was some provision about licensing, so to deal with the contradictions in granting licenses for like 24-hour booze venues, and they acknowledged alcohol issues, so something else that we would need to look at.
I take your comments. I will raise that with the chair of licensing to see whether we can get an adequate response that ties in the restrictions as well, the relationship between the PSPO and the current licensing laws. Thank you for raising that.
All right. I'm happy to. I think we need to move to the vote on the amendment. I know it's a very big issue, and we probably should have had a much longer meeting planned out, really, shouldn't we? But so moving to the vote on the amendment, are all members in favour of this amendment? Any dissent, please raise your hand. No, that has passed unanimously then on the amendment. So moving to the recommendations as amended. So the recommendations can be seen on page 63. Obviously, they are now amended. Are we all agreed with the recommendations? Any member wishing to dissent? So dissent. So
I'd like to move a motion that we defer this. I think it's really concerning that even though in exploratory assessment issues of race and disability didn't come out, there's no explicit reference to them, and you know, those, if we can't consider the impact on people with those protected characteristics, then we can't discharge our duty. So therefore we can't make a full decision without that information. The Race Equality Commission makes it very clear that we need to make transparent the use of robust equality impact assessments. It's really clear that that is something that needs to be done before we can make a decision. So I'd like to suggest we defer this decision.
thank you. Do you have a seconder? No. So unfortunately that can't go ahead without a seconder. So we will move to the substantive. I take it out as dissent as well for the substantive. So we'll move to a vote conducted by show of hands. Don't worry, Willis, it's a lot easier than the electronic voting system at policy committees. So all those in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those against, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any abstentions? So that report was passed with the votes. My assistant.
Was your vote in favour?
Oh yes, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, sorry. So 8 in favour, 1 against, so that the substantive
so that was passed.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. I know that was a very big decision. But yes, thank you. We move on to item 11 now. This can be found from page 149 of the agenda pack. This is the final agenda item, and we might finish on time, the extended time. So the presenting officer is Jane Wilby, and this is the 2024-25 Q2 budget monitoring. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and the report's to provide the committee with an update of the financial position for the second quarter of 24-25, which includes 6 months of accounts to the 30th of September and a 6-month forecast to the end of the year. The full report was taken to the Finance and Performance Committee on the 18th of November. It's important for committees to consider the overall financial context when considering decisions that impact on committee budgets. The Council is reporting a 34 million overspend against the budget, which is approximately 7% of our net revenue budget. The Council plans to fund the in-year deficit through a combination of drawing from reserves and use of a specific provision that was set aside as part of business planning to manage our subsidy loss issue. The financial position is driven by three main factors: funding reductions, increased demand and rising costs. Local government has experienced significant funding reductions. Sheffield has £858 less to spend per household in real terms compared to 2010-11, a reduction of 26%, which is well above the national average of 18%, or £556 per dwelling. Demand for our services has increased, particularly for our most vulnerable citizens, and continues to rise. We have faced significant levels of inflation since COVID, which has impacted our cost base. A 34 million overspend is substantial, and our officers are working diligently to develop solutions to reduce key areas of overspend. The position has remained stable from Q1 outturn position, but targeted work from finance with service colleagues over the last quarter has helped us understand the drivers of some of these cost challenges and develop collaborative action plans. We're forecasting to deliver 40 million of the 42 million savings target, which is achieving a 95% success rate. The main challenges remain in budgets for education, children's services, housing, finance and performance and adult social care committees with significant overspends. The issues are primarily due to home to school transport for children with special educational needs, tackling increased homelessness and rising demand and costs in adult social care. The community's parks and leisure budgets are forecasting a small underspend of 300,000 against a net revenue budget of 38.2 million as at Q2. Savings delivery is positive, with the majority of the savings set to deliver. The underspend is a result of a salary savings within the business improvement service. Service managers have shown a strong commitment to budget management and positive engagement with finance teams across the board, so extended thanks to colleagues in service for this. Future Sheffield programme. So the Council's key response to these financial challenges is the Future Sheffield programme, focused on transforming our services to create a more sustainable and efficient operating model. Transformation is essential so that we can ensure to continue delivering our statutory services while supporting city growth. Our transformation efforts align with the Council's broader strategic goals and will play a significant role in our budget setting process this year. Our medium-term financial strategy identified a budget gap of 68.9 million over the next 4 years, with 31 falling into next year. The autumn statement from government indicated a 3.2% real-term increase in core spending power for 25-26, including a 4.99% council tax increase, which is better than our original planning assumptions. The government plans to reform funding allocation, starting with a targeted approach in 25-26, followed by a broader redistribution from 26-27, which should result in a clearer multi-year financial outlook, aiding our strategic planning and resource management. So far, services have worked hard to develop savings proposals to bridge next year's gap, and a full report will be presented to the Finance and Performance Committee next week to present the current position. We expect to receive details of the finance settlement next week as well, with details to be worked through in January and presented to Strategy and Resources in February, ahead of full council in March. The paper is to note the Q2 financial position, and I'm happy to take any questions about the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry that everybody left for your report. I thought this was the exciting bit on the agenda. Do we have any questions or comments from members? No? Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your report. Yeah. So the report does contain recommendations for approval on page 151. Are we all agreed with those? I think we are all agreed. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our agenda. So thank you, everybody. It's been a long one. Won't see you until next year. So have a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.